There was something oddly familiar about Matt Reeves' 2022 gritty action blockbuster, The Batman. A heavy reliance on darkness felt similar to the Dark Deco atmosphere for the animated series. This Gotham was gothic chic, whereas the cartoon city was more sci-fi noir. But the overall vibe is nearly identical. The extended runtime means that every sequence averaged at 7 minutes, which is a big departure from a normal 3 to 4 minute average. Yet still, the 29-point story structure is present and perfectly balanced. The timestamps for every sequence can be found in the comment section for your viewing pleasure. Now, let's begin. We start as always with a focus on our protagonist, specifically their personality, their inner conflict, and their situation. An outsider watches the sheltered upper class of Gotham from afar, while the political web of corruption and resistance is introduced, as is the Riddler, whose vigilante campaign begins by murdering the mayor. Next, we examine where, why, and how our protagonist exists in their world, with a focus on why they don't quite fit in. Bruce Wayne, a privileged outsider, descends into the desperate, seedy underbelly of Gotham, where his righteous flair is not shared by the population, and he haunts from the shadows, his reputation putting him wherever he needs to be. Then a brief event happens, one that's never happened before. It's destined to lead all the characters away from their status quo. For our benefit, obviously, Batman emerges from the shadows in his full glory, outnumbered and unafraid. Which leads us to examine the effect of that something new to the status quo, specifically what's different now and what remains the same. Batman whoops up on a roving gang of street punks, and he endures the stink eye from the city's boys in blue, and gets drawn into the Gotham political web by the Riddler. We move along to the discovery that things are less than ideal, or else we explore how badly things are. Both scenarios are common. Anti-Batman sentiment radiates from Commissioner Savage. Bruce is shaken by the creation of a new orphan, and wonders through voiceover if his efforts are worth it. He compensates for the alarming side effects of his vigilante lifestyle, while his absence from Wayne Enterprises jeopardizes everything. Next, our characters dedicate their efforts to a specified goal, and this is always narrower in scope than what the third act will demand. Bruce and Alfred set to work cracking the cipher and the incoming riddles, and Batman brute forces a path to the Penguin and to critical answers. Then we run through a brief checklist of the main story elements that we can expect during this journey. Gotham's corruption and criminal underbelly, the Riddler's mystery and its investigation, Selina Kyle's wildcard involvement and separate agenda, and of course, blockbuster action and fight scenes. Which brings us to the brief event that launches our characters into the wild jungle of the second act. It's also called the oh shit moment. Batman protects Catwoman, which begins a working relationship and an iconic forbidden romance. Oh shit. We follow our characters as they discover the new rules and expectations of their journey. These are always distinct to the narrative at play. Selina introduces an emotional variable to the investigation, while a second murder widens the corruption conspiracy. The Riddler charges Batman with a mission to play bad guy connect the dots. Then Selina searches for intel among the criminal high rollers. Next, our characters showcase their ability to grow and progress, and this is typically an external or physical beat rather than internal or emotional. The district attorney confirms the Riddler's claims. Then Selina catches a whisper of her missing friend as the Riddler nabs his next corrupt victim, and Gordon puts into perspective the reach of the conspiracy. Then our characters face legitimate and understandable reasons to deviate from their stated convictions, agendas, or desires. Alfred discourages an existence that is only Batman. Then Bruce endures the anxiety of drawing attention. Falcone hints to a working relationship with Thomas Wayne, creating a guard against close contact with Catwoman. And Bruce takes the temperature of the population, realizing he is the face of the problem. We endure the anxiety as our characters face an escalation of problems and complications. Coulson crashes the funeral with a neck bomb, yet Batman walks straight up to him like half his face isn't still exposed. The Riddler makes public as much of the conspiracy as Coulson will confess to, but he refuses to drop anyone's name as time ticks down. Then the bomb detonates in Batman's face. Next, our characters evolve internally or emotionally, and they do this by using elements of the plot or story, which they've gathered and learned so far. Gordon defends righteous Batman against his brothers in blue, and sacrifices his own exposed jaw to the investigation. They regroup and talk it out and point to the Penguin as the rat, then discover that Maroni's drug trade was never shut down, as reported. Then our journey-weary characters come to terms with their ongoing struggles. Moments and elements of the first act are used to gauge their progress. Selina's Act 1 mystery is tragically resolved. Then Batman, haunting the Act 1 darkness, now haunts it with the Batmobile, which ramps up the Act 1 action to an adrenaline-pumping pace. And the Act 1 brute force method of getting to the Penguin pays off again, which results in a brief event that strikes at our protagonist's core conflict. Batman captures the Penguin, the walking Wikipedia of Gotham's underbelly, and there's no turning back from here. We receive needed answers alongside our characters, which relate to both their external journeys and their internal conflicts. The Wayne family is revealed as the origin for the current corruption racket, albeit unknowingly, the origin all the same. Alfred barely survives an attack, underscoring the danger to loved ones and others, like Catwoman. Next, our characters complete their narrow scope objective, yet discover that their victory is shallow or altogether meaningless, and must complete a wider scope objective. Batman brute forces a confession and further cooperation from Selina, but it only makes her more volatile to his investigation. Bruce witnesses the alleged depth of the Wayne-Falcone relationship, but it's only one part of the Riddler's growing mystery. Then our characters face an existential conflict that wounds their sense of self and identity, or their physical journey. Bruce enters the inner sanctum of Carmine Falcone, defenseless and alone. Falcone not only confirms the story, but worsens it for maximum manipulation. Then Alfred somewhat clears Thomas's name by adding the Wayne family perspective to the charge. We celebrate with our protagonist in light of an undeniable win, which is always related to the rebirth in some way. Selina grabs Kenzie as promised, a known and unmurdered conspirator, who reveals the full scope of the corruption and how it's funded. Then Batman goes after Falcone the Rat, as instructed by the Riddler. Next, our characters suffer a grand loss. This is always connected to their newfound inability to quit their journey. Selina gets to Falcone before Batman, maybe jeopardizing the Riddler's endgame, which puts him on high alert for Batman's entrance. Then Falcone is assassinated anyway, maybe jeopardizing the Riddler's endgame. Then we experience a thematic freefall, as the main story elements are ramped up and thrown into upheaval. The Riddler's existence is tangible now and disturbing. Then he surrenders without appeal, an odd turn of events. His unhealthy obsession and community involvement are revealed, as is the truth of Bruce Wayne being a central aspect of the conspiracy, which forces us into a brief event that robs our protagonist of seemingly any hope of success. Suspecting his identity is compromised, Batman agrees to meet the Riddler face to face. We watch our characters realize that they cannot return to their first act selves, and they turn to face the wider scope objective. The Riddler explains his irrevocable grudge against Bruce, then reveals how Batman was both partner and pawn. Batman rejects him, causing an unhinged meltdown. Then the Riddler reveals a finale to his purge of Gotham. Next, our characters use the major swings of the story and their personal journeys to move towards the climax. Batman finds a hidden clue and uncovers the terrifying finale, just as Gotham becomes even more of a dystopian nightmare hellscape. The gang mentality returns with unhinged conspiratorial gunmen, and Selina gets caught up unexpectedly in events around the movie. Then the final confrontation plays out between our protagonist and characters against the antagonistic force. Gordon gets to and protects the new mayor, as Batman shows up and kicks the asses of armed and gullible idiots. Selina returns the favor and protects Batman. Then Batman fully stops the Riddler's endgame, and he witnesses the negative impact of being vengeance incarnate amid an angry and desperate population, which culminates in a brief moment where our protagonist finally, and oftentimes metaphorically, overcomes their place in the Act 1 status quo. Batman puts himself at mortal risk to protect Gotham. We experience the direct aftermath of the climax. This can give our characters a moment to reflect on the situation, or else wind down the action with a coda. Batman survives the massive shock and fall into shallow water, then becomes a beacon of hope and moving forward from the darkness. And even in the aftermath, Gotham is poised to still be Gotham. Next, we touch base with additional characters, typically to contrast them against the new status quo. The population looks forward to build back better from the previous regime, and clutches to Batman, who now represents change and true renewal. But the Riddler befriends maybe the Joker in Arkham, casting a dark shadow over the city's future. Then we conclude with a tight focus on our protagonist, specifically to contrast them against how we met them at the opening. Batman refuses to run away and start anew with Selina, and charges back into Gotham to face the next baddie in the Rogues Gallery. And there you have it. Matt Reeves' 2022 gritty action blockbuster The Batman adheres perfectly to the 29-point story structure every step of the way, and it proves that a movie's extended runtime does not allow it to depart from the standard Hollywood format. Now let's move on from a traumatized billionaire who hunts in the night to an outcast teenager who hunts in the night, with my deep dive into the millennial version of Turning Red. Join me next time for John Fawcett's 2000 cult favorite horror, Ginger Snaps. As always, thank you so much for your time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content, and consider commenting on and sharing this video to help the channel find its audience. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll talk at you next time.